Alright, so we are at the rear suspension, passenger side. Everything's back together. Now we had extra problems, similar problems, and different problems on this side than we did the driver's side. One problem is this guy's in the way. This is plastic. It's clamped to a piece of rubber which goes into the gas tank down here. So, the first problem we encountered was trying to loosen up the swing arm. Now, on the other side, you'll recall I had taken that out, taken the one out on the integral link, and just loosened that one, and then let it swing down. The process of doing that on the driver's side, we snapped that bolt that goes through, which is only supposed to be torqued to, I believe, 44 foot-pounds. Yeah, 44 foot-pounds swing arm to axle support front. Alright, so that was a problem on that side. On this side, it was so seized in there, I couldn't even loosen it. I couldn't snap at the bolt like I did on the other side. Couldn't get it out. So I had to improvise. Said, okay, well, I can probably still do everything and get to the ball joint with the swing arm in. The only difference is going to have to be, I'm going to do everything a little bit out of order, because I did ball joint was one of the first things I did on the other side. And since the integral link is going to interfere, or the swing arm itself, all that stuff's going to interfere with the ball joint. We had to take everything else out first. That way we could pick this up, and it would clear the swing arm, and then I could do the ball joint by myself. Press it out towards the front of the car, press it back in towards the rear. Which I was able to do by myself. I didn't need any assistance this time. It was just mildly more complicated because of the different steps I had to take. So everything else was pretty much seized in. It was a bitch to break everything loose. This side also required heat, I believe. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe I only impacted that off, I think. Yeah, I believe that's what happened, actually. I was able to impact this off, which I believe was a 21 at the time. It's now a 22, because the kit gives you a different size nut. And then this one still had that little 7mm thing, which on the other side I had tried with different little wrenches. And then this side we just used a whole bunch of heat again. And then the vice grips. And since we couldn't rest the vice grips up against it this time, because now we're going the opposite direction, you just put one hand on your 17, I think that was what that was. 17, and then your 7, or whatever size nut this was. It's been a few days now. And then you just go one way with one way with the other after a bunch of heat and liquid wrench, and busted it loose. Boom, done. Got those out. And we had the exact same problem with the rear shock on this side as we did the other, which was I ripped the bushing out, and then that big shaft was stuck in here. And last time I was able to get the 19 on the other end of this and turn it. This thing was so seized in here that when I put the 19 on and tried to move it in any direction, all I did was just like collapse and cave in that shaft. So I spent like 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then I believe on Sunday, for twice a day, I'd come out in the morning before work and after work, and I'd spray liquid wrench down in through the shaft in the center to fill this up, and then spray it out here. And then on Sunday, I just grabbed that big hammer and just bashed its brains in, left, right, up, down, just kept hitting it with a hammer, and then with one hand, and then I had my pickle fork wedged down in here, and then just kept prying while I was bashing it with the hammer, and then it popped right out. So that was still a pain in the ass. It slowed me down, but got her done through strength and perseverance. Unfortunately, while doing all that, I did notice when I was under the vehicle that this brake hose down here is all rotted out. It's done. So brake hose was done, order new ones therein, so now we got to bleed brakes as well and torque all this stuff back together. So what we're gonna, the only thing I need to do now is get the big jack, lift up the suspension until it just comes up off the stand, torque everything down with these torque specs. Some of these require the load, some of these don't. A good rule of thumb is anything on this chassis side needs to have a load on the suspension, and anything that's a bushing needs to have a load on the suspension. None of the ball joint things that connect, like that or that, need to have the load, but everything else that's got a bushing through it need to have the load. Also bought hub rings. I have 4 plastic ones, and I bought 4 aluminum ones because I wasn't sure which is better, so I just bought a pack of each. So I believe the rim, or this hub's supposed to be like 72.5-ish millimeters, whereas the inside of this, because this is an aftermarket, is like a 74 point, whatever the hell the difference is. So got hub rings, plastical, and aluminum. And the problem I had was with the micrometer is I was able to measure the hub, but I couldn't measure it here because the stick thing kept poking into this. So I just said, screw it, I'll probably need it. So I bought it, and as you see, it will fit right in there. And then this side will also slide right on the shaft. So I'll just use some anti-seize, put that on there, and then we should be golden. So we're gonna get that done now, and I'm gonna try to get that brake hose off and then bleed at least that corner of the brakes, and then work my way to that side, then the front passenger, then the front driver, get all that done. And then the only thing I still have to do on the front is I did buy new hub, or little sway bar bushings. That was the only bushing kit that didn't come with my kit. I bought them aftermarket, or I bought them someplace else from Mile, or Meal, however you pronounce it, M-E-Y-L-E. So we'll put that on, which will be easy. There's only 2 13mm nuts that hold the little brackets that hold the bushings on the sway bar. So bust those out, and then the only thing we'll have to do is put the interior back in, align it, and then we're done. The one last piece of advice I will give is, if you want to do this as easily as possible, after you take everything loose, when you're going to put everything back together, do this last. The last thing you need to put in is you're going to want to slide that shaft into this wheel carrier, because if you don't, you're going to have a real pain in the ass trying to line the swing arm up with the integral link and that big long through bolt for the alignment, that centric bolt. It's not going to be a fun time. So if you want to put it back together properly, assuming the swing arm is still in your way, the last thing you should be doing is the ball joint, whereas I did it almost first on that side because I was able to get the swing arm low and out of the way. And even if you do get the swing arm low and out of your way, do this last, because I struggled, and it took me like an hour or more on the other side because I had to get 2 jacks and line things up and hit things with hammers, and it was just a pain in the ass. It was a nightmare, and I almost did not want to do. I would consider I'll never do this again because of how big of a pain in the ass it is just to line stuff up. But when I did this last, it actually wasn't too bad, because you can freely move this up and down, left and right, and swing all around with this not in the way. So, mount that up in there, bolt your put your 3 nuts in there that'll hold it there, so you can leave it here, just don't put this side in. So you get your everything in here just kind of where it needs to go, snug but not tight yet because you can't torque it without the load on it. You'll move the swing arm up, it'll go through the ball joint. Put your big huge through bolt, your eccentric one, put that eccentric one through there. You'll be able to more easily line everything up on this end and that end, snug it down. And at that point, you can take this, slide it in with your anti-seize, of course, snug it up, and then you're golden. Now you can torque everything down. It's going to be the fastest way to reassemble this without you spending like a day or two struggling trying to jack things up, especially if you're by yourself. So I hope that helps. That's my advice when taking this apart and putting it back together. You can do it without loosening the swing arm. It's just kind of in your way. You're not going to be able to move your socket as far when you're trying to loosen things because you're going to bang into the swing arm, especially with the shock and everything. But, you know, and I did have to make some makeshift shielding here with that turkey pan, because as I was putting a bunch of heat and fire and everything on this, I didn't, you know, it was getting kind of sketchy with the fuel tank stuff right there. But, alright, so I hope that helps. Just be calm, take your time, watch this video, watch more if you need to, rewatch it, but just remember, when you're putting everything back together, to your ball joint first, torque this stuff in, get it through there, or thread it through. You don't have to torque it, just get it snug. You can torque those things with the ball joints. You can leave that hanging through there, just don't bolt that in first, not until everything else is lined up. And then this will be easy enough, because you'll still be able to pick this up and move it around. Not as freely, because that's in the way now, but you'll just enough to where you can slide it in there easily. Alright guys, peace.